Robert Jenkins walked into the courthouse on a cool Monday morning. The building felt familiar after 15 years as a judge in Millfield. He nodded to the security guards and straightened his black robe before entering his chambers. Today marked 5 years since his wrongful arrest. Robert still remembered every detail. He had been jogging in his own neighborhood when 2 police officers stopped him. Despite explaining he lived just 3 houses away, they didn't believe him. The officers, William Parker and James Miller, handcuffed him right there on his street. "You fit the description," Officer Parker had said. Robert had tried to stay calm. "I'm a judge at the county courthouse. My ID is in my pocket." They ignored him until a neighbor confirmed his identity. The embarrassment burned deep, even now. The charges were dropped, but the memory stayed. Robert poured himself a cup of coffee and reviewed the day's cases. His assistant, Martha, knocked on his door. "Good morning, Your Honor." "Here's the updated schedule for today," she said, handing him a folder. "Thank you, Martha," Robert replied with a smile. He opened the folder and froze. There on the list was a misconduct hearing for 2 officers, William Parker and James Miller. The same men who had arrested him 5 years ago. Robert's hand trembled slightly. He could recuse himself, ask another judge to take the case. That would be the easy path. But Robert had built his reputation on fairness. He believed everyone deserved equal treatment under the law. "Everything all right, Judge?" Martha asked, noticing his expression. "Yes," Robert said. "Just surprised by a coincidence." The case involved the officers allegedly using excessive force during an arrest of a young man named David Thompson. Robert read through the file carefully, determined to approach the matter with an unbiased mind. When court began at 9:30, Robert took his seat at the bench. The courtroom filled with the usual mix of lawyers, defendants, and observers. Robert noticed officers Parker and Miller sitting with their attorney near the front. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Robert Jenkins," the bailiff announced. As everyone stood, Robert watched the officers' faces. At first, they didn't seem to recognize him. Then Officer Parker's eyes widened. He whispered something to Miller, who looked up in shock. They clearly hadn't checked which judge would be presiding over their case. "Be seated," Robert said calmly. "We'll begin with case number 27B415, regarding the complaint against officers William Parker and James Miller." The prosecutor stood and outlined the case. David Thompson had been pulled over for a broken taillight. The situation escalated, ending with Thompson being roughly handcuffed and suffering a dislocated shoulder. Throughout the morning, Robert listened carefully to testimony from witnesses. He asked fair questions of both sides. When Officer Parker took the stand, he seemed nervous, his eyes frequently darting toward Robert. "Officer Parker," Robert asked, "what made you decide to remove Mr. Thompson from his vehicle?" "He was acting suspicious, Your Honor," Parker replied. "Reaching around in his car." "And what did you discover when you searched the vehicle?" "Nothing illegal, sir." During the lunch break, Robert sat alone in his chambers. His mind traveled back to his own experience, how helpless he felt in handcuffs, how the officers had refused to listen. Martha knocked softly. "Judge, do you want me to order your usual sandwich?" "No thanks," Robert said. "I'm not very hungry today." "Is it about those officers?" Martha asked. "I remember when that happened to you." Robert nodded. "I need to be completely fair here. This isn't about me or what happened 5 years ago." "That's why you're a good judge," Martha said. As court resumed for the afternoon session, Robert noticed something different in Officer Miller's demeanor. The man kept looking at him with what seemed like genuine regret. The defense attorney called Miller to testify. As he approached the stand, Miller paused. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "before I begin, I need to say something." The courtroom fell silent. Robert's heart beat faster. What would happen next would test everything he believed about justice and forgiveness. The path forward wasn't clear, but Robert knew one thing: this unexpected reunion might offer healing for wounds that had never properly closed. The E.N.D. Robert leaned forward slightly as Officer Miller stood before him. The courtroom was completely silent. "Your Honor," Miller said, his voice shaking, "I know this might not be the right time, but I recognize you." Robert kept his face neutral. "Officer Miller, this hearing is about the complaint filed by Mr. Thompson. Any personal matters should be addressed outside my courtroom." Miller nodded, looking down. "Yes, Your Honor. I apologize." The defense attorney quickly stepped in, guiding Miller through his testimony about the traffic stop. According to Miller, David Thompson had been uncooperative and reached under his seat, making the officers fear for their safety. "And what did you find when you searched under the seat?" Robert asked. "Just a phone charger, Your Honor," Miller admitted. During cross-examination, the prosecutor showed video footage from a nearby store that captured part of the incident. The recording showed Thompson being pulled roughly from his car despite having his hands visible on the steering wheel. Robert called for a short recess. In his chambers, he paced back and forth, struggling with his emotions. The case was bringing back painful memories, but he couldn't let that cloud his judgment. When court resumed, Officer Parker took the stand. Unlike Miller, Parker seemed defensive, insisting their actions were justified by department protocol. "Officer Parker," Robert asked, "would you say your approach to Mr. Thompson was influenced by any factors other than his actions?" Parker hesitated. "What do you mean, Your Honor?" "I'm asking if Mr. Thompson's appearance, age, or race played any role in how you handled this stop." The courtroom grew tense. Parker shifted uncomfortably. "No, sir. We treat everyone the same." Robert noticed Parker wouldn't meet his eyes. The similarity to his own experience was striking. The officers had claimed they would have stopped anyone jogging in that neighborhood who looked out of place. As the day's session ended, Robert announced they would continue tomorrow. "I expect both sides to be prepared with their closing arguments," he said. Walking to his car that evening, Robert heard footsteps behind him. "Judge Jenkins," a voice called. It was Officer Miller, alone. Robert turned. "Officer Miller, we shouldn't be discussing the case outside court." "It's not about the case," Miller said. "It's about what happened 5 years ago. I've wanted to apologize properly for a long time." Robert studied the man's face. Miller looked genuinely troubled. "I didn't know you were a judge back then. But that's no excuse. We were wrong to treat you that way, and I've carried that guilt. Why bring this up now?" Robert asked. "Seeing you today, presiding over our case, it feels like life giving me a chance to make things right." Miller's voice cracked. "I've thought about that day many times. It made me question everything about how I do my job." Robert was silent for a moment. "Officer Miller, I appreciate your words. But my focus now is ensuring Mr. Thompson receives a fair hearing. Whatever happened between us has no bearing on this case." "I understand," Miller nodded. "But seeing you today made me realize something. Parker and we did the same thing to Thompson that we did to you. We saw what we expected to see, not what was actually there." Robert's expression remained neutral, but Miller's admission stirred something inside him. "Good evening, Officer Miller. I'll see you in court tomorrow." That night, Robert couldn't sleep. He sat on his porch, thinking about Miller's words. The officer seemed genuinely remorseful, but Parker had shown no such insight. The next morning, Robert arrived early at the courthouse. He reviewed his notes carefully, determined to remain impartial despite the personal connection. As the bailiff called the court to order, Robert noticed something different. Officer Parker was whispering intensely to his attorney, looking agitated. Miller sat quietly, his expression somber. The defense attorney stood. "Your Honor, before we continue, Officer Parker would like to make a statement." Robert raised an eyebrow. "Proceed." Parker stood, his hands trembling slightly. "Your Honor, after considerable reflection overnight, I want to change my testimony." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Robert's interest was piqued. What had happened between yesterday and today to cause this shift? I wasn't completely truthful yesterday, Parker continued. And I believe I owe this court, Mr. Thompson, and you personally, an honest account of what really happened that day. Robert leaned forward, his gaze steady. The unexpected turn of events suggested this case might be headed in a direction none of them had anticipated. The E.N.D. Robert maintained his professional demeanor despite his surprise. Officer Parker, you understand that changing your testimony is a serious matter? Yes, Your Honor. Parker's voice was strained but clear. After court yesterday, Officer Miller and I had a long talk. He reminded me of something that happened 5 years ago with you. A hushed murmur spread through the courtroom. Robert tapped his gavel once. I didn't want to see the connection at first, Parker continued. But the truth is, when we pulled over Mr. Thompson, we did profile him. Just like we did with you that day you were jogging. Robert kept his face neutral, though his heart was racing. Please focus on the facts relevant to Mr. Thompson's case. The facts are that we saw a young black man in a decent car and assumed something was wrong. We claimed he was reaching for something, but really, his hands never left the wheel until I ordered him out. Parker looked down. I was rough with him because I was already convinced he was guilty of something. I just needed to find out what. The courtroom was completely silent now. David Thompson, sitting with his lawyer, stared at Parker in disbelief. And your previous testimony? Robert asked. I lied, Your Honor. I said what I thought would protect my job. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, in light of this admission, the prosecution would like to request a brief recess to reassess our position. Robert granted the recess. In his chambers, he sat at his desk, hands slightly shaking. Martha brought him a cup of tea. You okay? She asked gently. I've never seen an officer change testimony like that, Robert said. Especially not because of a personal connection to me. When court resumed, the prosecutor announced they were seeking maximum disciplinary action against both officers, including termination. The defense attorney looked resigned. Just as Robert was about to speak, David Thompson stood up. Your Honor? May I say something? It was unusual, but Robert nodded. Briefly, Mr. Thompson. I've been angry for months about what these officers did to me, Thompson said. But hearing Officer Parker tell the truth just now, that matters to me. I don't want them fired. I want them to learn and do better. Robert considered Thompson's words. Mr. Thompson, while I appreciate your input, this court must determine appropriate consequences based on department regulations and the law. During the lunch break, Robert thought carefully about his options. The case had become about much more than a single incident. It represented a chance for real change. When court resumed, Robert called both officers to stand before him. Officers Parker and Miller, this court has heard testimony that you wrongfully detained and injured Mr. Thompson based on biased assumptions. Officer Parker has admitted to providing false testimony initially. These are serious violations. Both men stood with heads bowed. However, Robert continued, this court also recognizes the value of truth and growth. Officer Parker's decision to correct his testimony, while late, demonstrates a willingness to be accountable. Robert looked at Miller. And Officer Miller, your conversation with your partner that led to this changed testimony suggests you understand the importance of confronting bias in policing. Robert took a deep breath. Here is my ruling, both officers will be suspended without pay for 60 days. During this time, you will complete comprehensive bias training. You will also perform 200 hours of community service in Mr. Thompson's neighborhood, working with youth programs. Additionally, you will participate in a restorative justice session with Mr. Thompson, if he is willing. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. This was not a typical ruling. Finally, Robert said, you will both work with the department training unit to develop a program addressing bias in policing, using your experiences as teaching tools. After dismissing court, Robert watched as the officers approached Thompson and his lawyer. They seemed to be speaking respectfully, with Parker even extending his hand. Later that evening, as Robert was leaving, he found both officers waiting near his car. Judge Jenkins, Parker said, I want to apologize for what happened 5 years ago. I didn't recognize my own bias then, but I do now. Miller nodded in agreement. Your fairness today, despite how we treated you, it's changed how I see my job. Robert considered their words carefully. Gentlemen, true change isn't measured in apologies or even in one moment of honesty. It's measured in the choices you make every day moving forward. As they nodded solemnly, Robert felt a weight lifting. Perhaps justice sometimes came in unexpected ways. The end 3 months passed since Robert's ruling in the Thompson case. The story had spread throughout the legal community and even made local headlines. Judge shows unusual mercy to officers who once arrested him. Some critics called his decision too lenient, while others praised it as innovative justice. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Robert sat in his chambers reviewing the day's cases when Martha knocked. Judge Jenkins, those officers are here to see you. They've completed their suspension and training. Robert looked up, surprised. Send them in. Officers Parker and Miller entered, looking different than they had in court. Both men stood straighter, their expressions open rather than guarded. Your Honor, Parker began, we wanted to update you personally on what we've been doing these past months. Robert gestured for them to sit. I'm listening. Miller pulled out a folder. We developed this training program like you ordered. It's been approved by the department, and we'll be leading the first session next week. Robert thumbed through the materials, impressed by their thoroughness. It included real-world scenarios, discussion questions about implicit bias, and practical guidance on respectful community policing. And how has the community service been? Robert asked. Parker's expression softened. Life-changing, honestly. We've been working with teenagers at the Westside Community Center. These kids, they had good reason to distrust police. But over time, we've built relationships. One young man in particular, Miller added. Marcus Johnson. 16 years old, brilliant student. He told us he used to walk the other way whenever he saw a patrol car. Now he's talking about maybe becoming a lawyer. Robert nodded, thinking of his own journey. And Mr. Thompson? How did the restorative justice session go? The officers exchanged glances. It was hard, Parker admitted. Sitting across from someone you've wronged, hearing directly how your actions affected them, there's nowhere to hide. But Thompson is remarkable, Miller said. After we talked through everything, he actually offered to participate in our training sessions. He's going to share his experience from the other side. Robert hadn't expected this outcome. That's impressive commitment from all of you. As they continued talking, Martha interrupted with a phone call. Judge Jenkins, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent situation in courtroom B. Judge Wilson has taken ill, and they need someone to step in for an arraignment hearing. Robert excused himself and hurried to courtroom B. There, he found a young man in handcuffs, Marcus Johnson, the very teenager the officers had mentioned. What are the charges? Robert asked the prosecutor. Shoplifting and resisting arrest, Your Honor. Robert reviewed the file quickly. Marcus had allegedly stolen headphones from an electronics store. The arresting officer claimed the boy had struggled when being detained. Marcus looked up, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. When Robert called the case, the public defender explained that Marcus had a receipt but had triggered the security alarm by accident. When the security guard grabbed him roughly, the boy had pulled away instinctively. The receipt was found in his backpack, Your Honor, the defender explained. This is a misunderstanding, not a crime. Robert was about to speak when the courtroom doors opened. Officers Parker and Miller entered quietly, having heard about the situation. They approached the prosecutor and spoke in hushed tones. The prosecutor looked surprised. Your Honor, in light of new information from these officers who know the defendant from community programs, we'd like to dismiss all charges pending verification of the receipt. Robert studied Marcus's face, the relief, the surprise at seeing the two officers speaking up for him. Charges dismissed, Robert declared. Mr. Johnson, you're free to go. After court adjourned, Robert found Marcus talking with the officers in the hallway. Judge Jenkins, Parker said, we'd like you to properly meet Marcus. He's the student I mentioned who wants to become a lawyer. Marcus shook Robert's hand nervously. Thank you for believing me, sir. The officers spoke up for you, Robert noted. That made a difference. They've been helping me prepare for college, Marcus explained. Officer Miller has been tutoring me in math, and Officer Parker helped me write my application essays. Marcus's face lit up. Really? That would be amazing. As they all walked together toward the exit, Robert reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a wrongful arrest 5 years ago to this moment, officers becoming mentors, a young man seeing a future in law, and himself finding unexpected healing in watching this change unfold. The 2 years had passed since Robert's ruling in the Thompson case. On a bright spring morning, he sat in the back row of the university auditorium, watching with pride as Marcus Johnson accepted his undergraduate degree in criminal justice. The young man had graduated with honors and already been accepted to law school with a full scholarship. After the ceremony, Robert made his way through the crowd. Marcus spotted him and hurried over, still wearing his cap and gown. Judge Jenkins. You came. Marcus hugged him warmly. I wouldn't have missed it, Robert said. Congratulations. There are some people who want to see you, Marcus said, leading Robert through the crowd. There stood officers Parker and Miller, dressed in suits instead of uniforms, alongside David Thompson. They had all come to celebrate Marcus's achievement. Your Honor, Thompson greeted him with a handshake. Good to see you again. Robert smiled. Please, call me Robert. I'm not in my robes today. Over the past 2 years, the training program developed by Parker and Miller had become mandatory for all officers in the county. Complaints against police had dropped by 30%. Thompson had become a regular speaker at these sessions, sharing his experience and helping officers understand the impact of their actions. We have some news, Parker said. I've been promoted to training sergeant. I'll be overseeing the bias awareness program full-time now. And I'm transferring to community outreach, Miller added. Working with schools and youth programs across the district. Robert nodded approvingly. You've both come a long way. Marcus's mother joined them, her eyes shining with tears of joy. Judge Jenkins, I can't thank you enough for mentoring my son. He talks about you all the time. Marcus did all the hard work, Robert said. I just showed him some possibilities. As they chatted, the university president approached their group. Judge Jenkins, I was hoping to catch you. Our law school is looking for adjunct professors to teach a course on ethics and bias in the legal system. The dean thinks you would be perfect. Robert was surprised. I've never considered teaching before. Just one evening class per week, the president explained. Your real-world experience would be invaluable to our students. Robert promised to think about it. Later, as they all shared lunch at a nearby restaurant, Marcus turned to him. You should take that teaching position, he said earnestly. Think about it, you could help shape the next generation of lawyers and judges. Thompson nodded in agreement. Your approach to justice made all the difference in my case. More people need to learn that perspective. That evening, Robert sat on his porch, reflecting on the journey that had begun with his wrongful arrest. What could have remained a painful memory had somehow transformed into something powerful and positive. His phone rang. It was Martha, his court assistant. Judge, have you seen the news? The governor just announced a new state commission on justice reform. And guess what? Your name is on the short list to chair it. The next morning, Robert received the official invitation. The commission would review policies and recommend changes to reduce bias in the legal system statewide. His experience with the Thompson case had caught the governor's attention. 1 week later, Robert stood at a podium at the state capitol. Behind him stood a diverse group of commission members, judges, lawyers, community activists, and law enforcement officials. Among them were Parker, Miller, Thompson, and even Marcus, who had been invited as a student representative. 5 years ago, Robert began, I experienced firsthand what happens when bias infects our justice system. I was wrongfully arrested in my own neighborhood." He paused, looking at Parker and Miller. 2 years ago, those same officers appeared in my courtroom, and we all faced a choice: perpetuate the cycle of distrust, or break it. The crowd listened intently as Robert continued. True justice isn't about punishment alone. It's about growth, healing, and creating systems that work fairly for everyone. On this commission, we'll examine not just what's broken, but how to fix it together. After the ceremony, as they all walked down the Capitol steps, Robert felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His personal pain had become a catalyst for change reaching far beyond one courtroom. "You know," Miller said quietly, walking beside him, "that day we arrested you was the worst mistake of my career. But looking at everything that's happened since, maybe it was also the most important." Robert nodded. Sometimes justice takes unexpected paths. The real test is what we build along the way. As they reached the bottom of the steps, Marcus looked at the four of them, the judge, the officers, and Thompson, and smiled. This is how change really happens. One relationship at a time. The end.